XRP holders, get ready, because what just leaked out of Ripple's legal orbit is sending shockwaves through the crypto space. Whispers are growing louder, speculation is turning into conviction, and all signs now suggest that Ripple may be preparing for one of the most aggressive ETF positioning strategies we've ever seen. Institutions are stirring, liquidity models are being reworked, and timelines are shifting faster than the SEC can stall. This is not just another ETF update, this is the beginning of the institutional liquidity war for XRP. And if you're holding right now, you are sitting on a fuse that may already be lit. What we're hearing is that Ripple is now aligning internal strategies around ETF readiness, and that could mean custody partnerships, liquidity bridging models, and cross-border settlement pilots designed to prove that XRP can support institutional-grade capital inflows. But here's where it gets even more intense. Sources close to institutional desks are suggesting that multiple ETF issuers are exploring partnerships with banks already testing RippleNet, meaning that the pipe for ETF liquidity could run directly through Ripple's existing infrastructure, cutting approval rollout times drastically. And that raises one massive question: if XRP gets the green light, how fast could institutional inflows scale? And what would that do to price in the first 30 days? Consider this: when Bitcoin ETFs launched, billions flooded in within days. When Ethereum ETFs were confirmed, institutional models instantly recalculated their exposure. Now imagine that same surge being funneled through a token with faster settlement, cheaper execution, and direct ties to existing financial rails. XRP doesn't just get an ETF, it becomes the liquidity backbone of a new institutional settlement era. And that is exactly why this moment is different. Right now, XRP's price is sitting in what traders are calling the pre-event compression zone. Historically, XRP coils before major catalysts, volatility drops, trading interest seems muted, and then, out of nowhere, it snaps. And when it snaps under institutional conditions, the move is often explosive. Look at 2017, look at 2020, XRP didn't climb gradually, it detonated, and now, with ETF anticipation merging with Ripple's expanding bank partnerships, the fuse is shorter than ever. Here's the bottom line: Ripple's silence right now is not weakness, it is positioning, and ETF issuers are already circling the asset like sharks waiting for regulatory blood in the water. So what happens next? XRP holders need to understand that ETF approval isn't just about price. It's about narrative shift, it's about psychological transformation, it's about taking XRP from retail speculation territory into institutional necessity. The moment an XRP ETF enters the approval conversation with credibility, major financial networks will shift from asking if XRP has utility. FOMO becomes systemic, because institutions do not chase hype, they chase positioning ahead of macro shifts. Now, pair that with Ripple's ongoing central bank relationships, pilot programs with digital currencies, and the quiet accumulation happening beneath the surface, and we are looking at a financial ecosystem that may already be preparing for an XRP liquidity bridge, even before the ETF hits. But here's the flip side: with anticipation comes manipulation. Whales know that the approval timeline, even delayed, creates a psychological pressure cooker. They will shake weak hands, they will engineer dumps to trigger panic, and they will reload, because when a regulated ETF gateway cracks open, access becomes frictionless, and every hedge fund, pension group, and institutional liquidity desk will be free to move in without custodial risk concerns. And that is when XRP exits the underground speculation phase and enters the regulated capital era. But understand this clearly: not everyone will make it to that phase with conviction intact. In every pre-event cycle, there is a moment where fear reaches peak saturation, headlines scream uncertainty, analysts turn bearish, influencers call for collapse, and yet, beneath the noise, the pipeline continues to assemble quietly, institutionally, mechanically. The final question then becomes: when the ETF liquidity ignition begins, will retail holders be positioned, or will they be buying into a liquidity ladder already controlled by whales and institutional players? Because make no mistake, the inflows will not be evenly distributed, and those already holding when the surge begins will experience a multiplier effect, not available to late entrants. So what comes next is clarity, positioning, and resilience. Because as Ripple scales its institutional framework, and as ETF whispers turn into filings, and filings turn into timelines, and timelines turn into decisions, XRP will not wait for doubt to disappear before it moves. It never has, and it never will. That is why this moment is not just about watching charts, it is about understanding cycles, understanding sentiment warfare, understanding how institutional positioning always precedes public confirmation. XRP has always existed in a delayed recognition cycle, where adoption happens before acknowledgement, where partnerships surface before price reacts, and where infrastructure is built long before retail understands its purpose. But with an ETF, the delay between infrastructure and recognition could collapse overnight, because ETFs serve as megaphones for legitimacy, a BlackRock-backed, Fidelity-supported, or Franklin Templeton-approved XRP ETF would automatically rewrite XRP's identity from controversial altcoin to institutional-grade liquidity bridge, and once that happens, every bank exploring ISO 20022 corridors, every fintech experimenting with cross-border settlement rails, every liquidity provider balancing multi-asset exposure will begin factoring XRP into strategic models, not as a speculative gamble, but as a required hedge against global financial digitization. But here comes the truth that many are not ready for. The hardest part is not holding during hype. The hardest part is holding during silence, right before ignition, that phase we are in right now. This is where most retail holders lose belief, lose patience, and exit, only to watch institutions enter with volume and confidence. So right now is where discipline becomes strategy, not emotion. Because the crypto market operates on delayed reactions until a catalyst forces immediate repricing, and an ETF catalyst, when fully confirmed, is not gradual, it is not slow, it is violent, liquid, immediate, and possibly historic. And that is why I'm telling you, this period before decision windows tighten is the psychological filter of the next major wealth transfer. Because those who cannot survive silence will not be in position for scale, and those who understand timeline compression, long-term positioning, and institutional entry psychology will be prepared when the narrative flips from doubt to inevitability, and when that flip happens, it will feel sudden, even though it was building for months. So as XRP holders right now, we are not just investors, we are early witnesses to a transition from controversy to compliance, from uncertainty to regulation, from speculation to macro integration. And if the ETF approval process accelerates or even remains under active review, it signals a new standard is approaching, and XRP is aligned to be at the center of it. So stay focused, stay aware. Because the next phase of this journey will not reward hesitation, it will reward conviction built on research, timing, and readiness for when institutional ignition begins. And as regulatory conversations intensify behind closed doors, as legal clarity accelerates under mounting political pressure, as liquidity providers quietly realign balance sheets toward digital settlement frameworks, the reality becomes unavoidable. XRP is transitioning from speculative asset to infrastructure-grade financial rail, and ETF momentum, even in its unconfirmed state, has already forced new conversations within institutional circles, because once something becomes an ETF candidate, it graduates into serious asset class speculation, entering the radar of risk desks, macro strategists, and capital allocators who move billions, not thousands. But even then, retail still controls the narrative online, through sentiment, through fear, through doubt. And that is why this silent phase becomes a psychological battlefield where narratives are tested, holders are filtered, and conviction becomes currency. Because when institutions deploy, they do not ask if people believe, they simply execute calculated entries based on timelines, volatility windows, and liquidity migration patterns. And XRP, with its lower circulating supply compared to giants like BTC and ETH, could see violent upward repricing, especially under aggressive ETF-driven accumulation bursts, because inflows do not trickle, they surge, creating liquidity vacuums that force rapid upward revaluation when demand exceeds available sell pressure. And that is exactly why some analysts are already constructing price models projecting aggressive movements upon confirmation, while others remain cautious, believing regulatory